Why are you doing that?
Hello. I've spoken before on this channel about how Dead Space is in the running as my favourite video game franchise of all time, and to be honest there's only really one contender. The series that I've always considered to occupy the #1 spot, with its wonderful world building and stellar story, and a new entry on the horizon. You clicked on the video, thanks for that by the way, so you already know what it is. I don't know why I'm pretending there's some mystery. Mass Effect is a series that I can only imagine looks somewhat strange from an outsider's perspective. If I'd never played the games and was simply going off their reputation, I might understand that it's ultimately about a coalition of interstellar species uniting to fight against the Lovecraftian horrors of the Reapers, which is true. I might also come to suspect that the first game was a much loved but clunky and dated title that served as something of a mission statement. The second was by far the best in every respect. The third was nothing but a notoriously terrible ending that is still considered one of the great disappointments in the history of the medium. And Andromeda was just woeful. Just utterly woeful. Oh, and you can have sex with aliens, I guess. I'd be forgiven for having less interest than the collective gaming community seemed to harbour back in the late noughties and the early 2010s. But I would be wrong. Except about that part with the aliens. Now, I won't be getting too much into the Andromeda controversy today because nobody wants to watch 3 hours of me getting off topic, but it's worth noting for the sake of this video that there's still a lot of excitement about the series, especially given what many fans are already aware of, which is that the first game still slaps, and the third's endings were largely ameliorated by the dozens of hours of great game beforehand, alongside the introduction of the extended cut and the simply stunning Citadel DLC that followed. There's also ongoing debate and controversy over which of the 4 endings was the best, so for me they ticked a fair few boxes. I've papered over a lot of cracks there, but I've got a video to get on with. And that's because on the 7th of November 2020, a new game was confirmed, with an announcement trailer dropping just over a month later on the 11th of December. This video was initially going to be what has been pushed back to part 2, where I'll be looking into what it is that fans want to see from the game, given the information that we've got so far. However, I realised after a while that there's just too much information to get through, so this one is going to be background knowledge, and I'll try to get the second part out as quickly as possible. Now, because so little is known about the game, I don't want to speculate too wildly, or announce that I have the answers. I mean, I barely have the questions, but to understand what exactly the fans want from the franchise, there are a lot of details to highlight and a lot of possibilities to cover. As such, I will be dividing what we know into 3 categories, and trying to offer an explanation as to what each key piece of information is, and broad strokes of what they might mean for the future, without drawing any conclusions or making any assumptions. Alright, so, finally, here goes. The first category is the shortest, and the area in which we can be most certain of what we know. Of course, BioWare has been very hush-hush about what's going on behind the scenes, but the information that we do have is looking exciting to say the least. Firstly, there are several key figures from the Mass Effect games who have returned to bring this new entry to life. Parashly, the cinematic director of the original trilogy, is joined by programmer and technical designer Brennan Holmes, and original Mass Effect art director Derek Watts. Now, the original trilogy director left BioWare for a second time in 2020 and is working on an original project with his newly founded Humanoid Studios, so that seems like a less likely collaboration. However, there's undoubtedly a wealth of experience in the team when it comes to working on Mass Effect games, as project director Michael Gamble alluded to when praising the returning Dusty Everman, whom he called one of the key people responsible for bringing the original Normandy to life. Given that Shepard's spaceship the Normandy was more or less one of the key characters of the first 3 games, this is pretty exciting for anyone who appreciates the significance of that kind of work. Crucially, Gamble notes of Everman's return that there are more like him, and there's really no saying how many, or the level of influence that they'll have. Whatever the truth may be, the combination of expertise and an atmosphere where the developers know the games inside and out can surely only benefit the final product. So this seems like great news for fans of the series, and in particular those who'd hope that Andromeda would more closely resemble its predecessors. On a more literal expansion of that idea, the new game will also be running on the Unreal Engine, which was used to produce each game in the original trilogy. This is huge news for a lot of Mass Effect fans, many of whom hated the use of the Frostbite engine that Andromeda was crammed into like a suit full of cats pretending to be a person. It was not particularly convincing. Moving on to the good stuff now, let's take a look at category number 2, the setting. This is an area with a lot of big questions left lingering by the events of the previous games, and the decisions that we made in those games, as they could have a huge impact on the setting and how it is operating at the time that this new story takes place. We also have a lot of questions regarding the extent to which the Andromeda Galaxy, which is a vastly distant setting, might be involved. There'll be a lot of crossover here with the third category, which is characters and story, but I've tried to divide it so that the implications of the information pertain to the corresponding section. Yeah, I've made this so much more complicated than it needed to be. First and foremost, BioWare has been heavily hinting at some combination of the 2 galaxies that have been explored in the Mass Effect games to date. At the very beginning of the announcement trailer for the upcoming entry, we are shown two galaxies, which we can probably safely assume to be Andromeda and the Milky Way. Straight away, this seems like a partial answer to that key question of whether the new game will be a continuation of the Andromeda storyline or its Milky Way counterpart, as this, alongside some tweets that seem to serve the same goal, heavily hints at the idea that both stories will be contributing somehow to what we're seeing here. Of course, this raises questions over when exactly the game is going to be set. If the events of Mass Effect 5 are happening after those of Andromeda, which is itself set 600 years after the ending of the original trilogy, there might be questions as to how each story can be successfully and organically incorporated into one. Whilst it's true that some of Mass Effect's species can survive that long, more on that in a minute, there would have to be some reason for the events of the new game to take place when they are, so in a sense, the hints that we've been given there only raise more questions than they answer. Moving on, we see chaos and debris, and hear distorted voices speaking over one another. We see a mass relay, which are those giant things that facilitate rapid travel between solar systems, and we hear the unmistakable boom of a Reaper. I've seen some say that this means they'll be back, but whilst I can't rule anything out, it seems more likely to me that they have been dealt with, and that this is to demonstrate the state of the galaxy at this time. No matter how well you did in Mass Effect 3, most of the galaxy has been devastated by the assault of the Squidronauts on all intelligent life, and the mass relays have been damaged or destroyed and painstakingly rebuilt. These are dark times for the Milky Way, and the memory of such a huge existential threat is still prominent, and probably won't go away for a long time yet. I think it will be really interesting to see how the loss of so many lives and the potential collapse of the galactic network might have impacted the worlds that we know, and what effect that will have on our story. How many years were people stuck on the other side of the galaxy to their home and their family? How many communities were torn apart, and how many new ones were forced to rise from the ashes? Even just within the places that we're already familiar with, everything might have changed, and that exploration that is such a key element throughout the majority of the franchise will have room to expand as we discover the locations that we thought we understood, each cast in a new light by the sheer unrivaled destruction of the Reaper War. And those shifting landscapes might also apply on a much smaller level, because even if it's set 6 or more centuries after the events of Mass Effect 3, there's still at least one character who will definitely be returning. Towards the end of the trailer, we see a figure climbing a dead Reaper, which itself has implications that I'll get into in a moment, and picking up a piece of N7 armor, calling back, it would seem, to Shepard's recognised status as one of humanity's elite warriors. And when they stand up, we see a crew in the background, and we recognise the figure as Liara, one of the most popular companions from the original trilogy, who was aged 106 in her first appearance, giving her about 900 years left to live, on top of the possibility of being cryogenically preserved, or whatever technology is used to keep the characters of Mass Effect Andromeda in suspended animation for 600 years. This therefore doesn't give us much information on the time frame, especially as there seems to be controversy over whether or not she's supposed to be visibly older, but I can see why many are finding themselves at the conclusion that the game's story will take place over 600 years after Liara's last appearance in Mass Effect 3. Incorporating the two galaxies into a narrative that, through her longevity, can be closely related to the stories of both Shepard and the Ryder twins. However, that's not the only piece of information regarding when this game might be set, and I'm afraid this one just seems to raise more questions. The poster that was released on the 7th of November in 2021 shows, among other things, 4 figures walking towards a fallen Geth. One of these figures is instantly recognisable as a Krogan, but the others are a bit tougher to make out. One looks a little blue, which perhaps indicates Liara's presence, whilst the others are even more vague. To me, this looks slightly Turian, but I'm really just grasping at straws here. Noticeably, the ship seen here is different to that from the trailer, where Liara looks so much older. So are these even the same people? If they are searching for a fallen Geth, it might suggest that this is taking place shortly after the Reaper War, which can result in the elimination of all artificial life. Because why would they wait 600 years to go after this unit? Could we even be seeing 2 separate storylines? That would make some sense given Liara's aging and the use of the word Godspeed, which has been confirmed as a reference to the moment when the Andromeda protagonist Ryder takes off in their ship, the Tempest. And if we do get at least minimal exploration of more than one time period, might we even be looking at Rex's red armour, worn alongside Garrus, and just a few paces between a dark-haired humanoid that might be Kaidan or Ashley, only one of whom survives the original game, depending upon your decisions. That could even be Legion over there, seeing as it ultimately dies no matter what. These ideas are of course questionable, especially seeing as each of those characters can die at some point in the original trilogy, so it's hard to count on them being in the next game. But they're each a major character, and it's not too far-fetched to suggest, should there be even the slightest semblance of story taking place before each character would have expired, that these characters would fit the bill. Also, once again, characters can be preserved for long periods of time, so it's not out of the question that 1 or 2 would show up in that way. I've also seen some suggestions that the Krogan in the picture could be Grunt, seeing as he's basically a child in the trilogy, and some Krogan, such as Warlord Okeer, are veterans of wars fought 1400 years before their appearance in the games. That might also be wishful thinking though, given that it could be literally anyone, and Krogan are killed off all the time. I can't imagine why. There's also a point to be made about the fact that the trailer maybe isn't as coherent in its projection of a narrative and fixed set of characters as it would like to trick us into believing. For instance, When this figure treks up the side of what appears to be a fallen Reaper, we are led to believe through the simple flow of the montage that it is Liara, and that it directly precedes this clip of picking up the N7 armor, and Liara standing up to reveal her identity. However, when you stop to think about it, they were alone, the sun was in a different position, the weather was much more aggressive, and they were climbing a giant Lovecraftian space monster, not standing next to a bunch of their friends on flat terrain. Their outfit was also mostly white, whereas we only catch a tiny glimpse of any lighter colour on Liara's outfit as she picks up the N7 armor fragment. Some have also drawn a line between this shot and this picture, but to me the ground is different, and although I do believe it to be the same ship, there are some small differences. Now of course these are all minor details, and it could literally be explained by just taking place at a different time, so I wouldn't want to suggest that this proves there will be separate timelines or individuals, but it does mean that we can't rule out that we're being shown glimpses of separate stories and times. Once again, there's really no way of knowing at this point, and we'll just have to wait for more information from BioWare before jumping to any conclusions. Going back for a second, the deactivated Reapers here raise some interesting questions about the implications of the Mass Effect trilogy upon the story at hand. Above all else, the galactic implications of Mass Effect 3's 4 endings will surely be seen in some respect. I mean, technically there are more than 4 based upon whether you get the good versions of each ending, but those variants are mostly just slightly tweaked versions of the same thing. As a quick reminder, / major spoiler, Mass Effect 3 ends with the realization that the Reapers exist to eliminate advanced organic life every 50,000 years because otherwise, all life, advanced or not, will inevitably be eliminated by rogue robots. This realization is followed by Shepard being granted the option to end the Reaper threat in one of 3 different ways. Firstly, you could destroy all synthetic life, including the Reapers themselves, to end the war then and there. This is the only ending in which Shepard can sort of maybe survive, but when you think about it, it also doesn't solve the fact that there will eventually be a robotic uprising. People are going to rebuild, and when they do, the same threat will appear. Secondly, you can choose to control the Reapers, which is what the corrupted elusive man wanted, and destroys your body, but does grant the option to wield the Reapers as your own tool for ending any attempts at the systematic execution of all organic life. Thirdly, you can sacrifice yourself entirely in order to synthesize organic and synthetic life forever, creating a galaxy in which there is no distinction between man and machine, so to speak. If there is no difference, then there will be no need to go to war. Oh, or you can shoot the glowing child who explains all this and everyone you know and love will presumably be eradicated, only for the cycle to continue. 8% of players choose this option. Who hurt you? The reason that I bring this up now is that the deactivated or deceased Reapers in the announcement trailer could be seen as suggesting that the Destroy ending took place, establishing a canon ending for the original trilogy. Whilst this is the most popular ending, such a decision would certainly be a disappointment for the millions of fans who have played hundreds of hours of Mass Effect time and time again, working hard so that it can culminate in one of the other 3 resolutions. Shepard has been an embodiment of our decisions and character for so long, and to canonize one particular ending would suddenly make them into someone else, someone distant from those of us who would have chosen something else. As I've already mentioned, the Destroy ending would also be the only one which doesn't in any way pose a long-term solution to the threat that the Reapers were designed to address. But it's the only ending in which Shepard can live on in their human form, and it would be a monumental task bringing 3 or 4 world-defining decisions to life in one game. So the seemingly dead Legion and Reapers, alongside the hint at continuing Shepard's story, would make an official Destroy ending seem like the most viable option. That said, the fallen figures might not be the result of a Destroy ending taking place, as there are certain other possibilities here. If the Geth from the poster was, for instance, Legion, then it was killed well before the Destroy ending could have taken place, and would be dead in each scenario. As for the Reapers, it's possible that these fell in battle during the war, or that there is some new threat that is capable of killing off even the existential threat of the original trilogy. Very ominous. If these were true, the control and synthesis endings certainly couldn't be ruled out. Furthermore, the vague presence of Shepard manifested only in a piece of armor doesn't have many strong implications regarding the possible canonization of any particular ending, especially as they were one of the most important and influential figures in the history of the galaxy. There's certainly been no confirmation that they survived, and there's perhaps an argument that the search for their fragmented armor suggests that they have been killed, which would somewhat contradict the possible focus on the Destroy ending, as that's the only one in which they aren't definitely dead. Finally, we also have some artwork from 2020 showing us what looks like remnant technology, which has only been found in the Andromeda galaxy prior to this point. There's also someone who looks like they might be an Angara in one of the pictures, and once again that species are native to Andromeda, and not encountered in the original trilogy. This also appears to be in a picture of some characters behind a ship that looks very similar, though with some very small differences, to the one that Liara and other characters from the Milky Way galaxy are seen with. This strongly suggests that the game takes place after the events of Andromeda, and that there has been additional movement either from the Milky Way to the galaxy, or back, or both. The seemingly dead Reapers and Geth in this scenario might have been lost to a new threat from elsewhere rather than the aforementioned Destroy ending. Either way, this currently seems like our best bet for the ship and crew of Mass Effect 5, which of course raises the question, will we be playing as Liara? And seeing as I've already put way too much of it into this section, I think it's time to move on to the next category, characters and story. So we know who this is, but who's that behind her? We have what looks like a Krogan, a Solarian, and something else vaguely humanoid. Probably a human, based upon how the movement looks to me. In the poster we have a Geth and perhaps a Turium, whilst the Mudskipper art also seems to depict a Drell and maybe an Angara. This makes me wonder about the protagonist. Humans are certainly not the central figures of the trailer, posters, or pictures. We have a wide range of species in this group where humanity almost seems like an afterthought. We're not fighting for a human supremacist group, or taking back Earth, or floating into a new galaxy on a ship designed to preserve humanity. Perhaps we will finally get the non-human protagonist that many fans have been yearning for since first experiencing the huge range of playable characters and classes in the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. Well, we can dream. I've already discussed some of the implications of the Derelict Reaper and the discovery of Shepard's armour, but here I also want to highlight the fact that Legion went out of its way to collect a piece of Shepard's N7 armour as it tracked them down during the events of the original trilogy, eventually donning it for itself after Shepard's first death at the beginning of the second game. Liara picking up the N7 armour here reflects that journey, and the crew discovering a Geth body that might be Legion in this poster could suggest that they will be similarly searching for whatever remains of Shepard, Legion, or both. This is important because Mass Effect has always been big on themes. The concepts of discovery, survival, war and exploration have each been essential to one particular game in the series, sitting at the heart of its foundations upon which the millions of complex little details of story, character and world building are constructed. If they really were searching for the remnants of the heroes of the past, which, meta as all hell, they could be seeking to complete something of a restoration after the destructive finale to the original trilogy. This could even take hundreds of years, which would of course open the door to the multiple timelines or later time period that would facilitate the inclusion of elements of Andromeda. The Geth focus in the poster could demonstrate that they are looking to restore a race that were always wronged, and eventually destroyed. There are so many possibilities, and so little reliable pieces of information. Everything seems to have so many pathways that it could follow, and ultimately all that we can do is wait. Or we could take matters into our own hands, because I've asked members of the Mass Effect community what they're hoping to see in the next entry, and I'll be exploring those responses in my next video, so be sure to tune in next time if you're interested in knowing just what it is that the fans are looking for in Mass Effect 5.